All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us. Tournament Podcast. This is Tom, joined, as always, by my brothers Marty and Mike. This is Tournament Podcast episode number 16, at least in terms of our full-length podcast episodes. And today we are going to be touching on the NFL, and we are going to create a reverse tournament of the 8 greatest running backs in NFL history. We've done the reverse tournament a few times, and I think it's appropriate here with the running backs. I will have, or a full disclosure here, this initially was going to be the greatest quarterbacks, but we didn't think there would be quite as much debate. I mean, maybe we'll touch on that on a later date, but I thought the running backs would make for a more interesting discussion. So, what we'll do here is we'll just start discussing one by one. We'll build a list. 10, 12 or so running backs. We will then whittle them down to the Elite 8, if you will. And we will rank them at the end as well. So we literally will have what we think is the greatest running back of all time, followed by 2, 3, and 4, which will be our Mount Rushmore, and then we'll have 5 through 8. So are you gentlemen ready?
Absolutely.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so I will go ahead and just throw a name out there to get things started. And I'll kind of get the elephant out of the room, if you will, because we don't want to forget old school. And pretty much anybody that is, 60 years old or older says Jim Brown was the greatest running back ever. So I think we at least want to start the conversation with Jim Brown on the list. Now, we're not quite as old school. So, Jim Brown in the end here may not make our Elite 8. Just off of the top of my head, I would think he would. I don't know if he's going to be the GOAT, but we'll see as we go here. But obviously, Cleveland Browns, Jim Brown, I don't think he had an overly long career. So let's take a look at that real quick. Jim Brown.
It looks like he played, I believe it was 9 seasons, maybe.
So you're not shabby.
Yeah, 9 seasons, yeah.
Yeah, never played into his 30s. So, yeah, 21 to 29 was when he retired. My God, though. You look at his stats, you are blown away. It's interesting. This man retired off of a season where he had 1,554 yards and 17 touchdowns, and he averaged 110 yards a game. Those stats sound impressive. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a 14-game season. So, yeah.
And then you keep in mind, like I said, he only played 9 seasons. He was an 8-time rushing champion, a 4-time MVP, and he was an All-Pro 8 times in 9 seasons. So he damn near led the league every season.
Well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he is the GOAT. We'll figure out 2 through 8. But he has, there's a strong case for Mr. Jim Brown to be the GOAT. Very, very impressive. All right, Marty, you want to toss out the next selection?
Well, absolutely, because this is from our generation, from my youth, and one of my favorites of all time is Walter Payton, who Absolutely. I don't think there's any argument that he should be in this list.
All right, Chicago Bears fans will be happy to hear that. Let's take a quick look here at Walter Payton.
Get a little bit of a longer career, obviously, than Jim Brown.
Yep.
Walter.
And I don't think Jim got any rings. It's not a one-man show. And I could be wrong. I don't think Cleveland's ever won a. Well, maybe they did back. Let's check that.
I know they haven't gone to the actual Super Bowl back in that day.
Yeah, it would be an AFL championship?
It says Jim Brown was an NFL champion in 1964.
That was before they were doing the AFL and What were
Okay,
the
so
two things?
I gotcha. Yeah, well, it was back in the day, it was gosh almighty.
I know. I'm trying to remember
I think it
what.
was the AFL and
That was one of them. Yep. I keep wanting to say the NFL, but that's what it became.
So Cleveland actually has won 4 titles: 1950, 54, 55, and 64. All 4. Okay, that's something else. So, well, we're trying to provide a history lesson here as well, ladies and gentlemen.
And it looks like it was the AFL and the NFL.
Okay, I thought it was the NFL, but I didn't want to misspeak.
So yeah, it looks like the Cleveland Browns did win the NFL championship back in 1964. So, like I said, even though it's not a one-man show, obviously, but Jim Brown is a champion.
Moving over to Walter, he started in 1975. Was his rookie season. Was pretty impressive for a rookie, but oh my God, besides the injury-riddled season of 1982, this man, good Lord, these stats are absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, yep. His touchdowns each season. I mean, the consistency.
Yeah, had over 2,000 all-purpose in 77. Had nearly the same in 79. Had over 2,000 all-purpose. Looks like in 83 and 84. I mean, wow. Yeah, he just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable numbers.
Much like Jim Brown, his running style was very aggressive.
Yeah.
Walter Payton, even though his nickname was Sweetness, he was far from sweet out there on the football field. I mean, he loved to lower his head, his shoulder, and just plow through people.
Yeah, there you got 2 choices: run out of bounds or put your head down. And Walter was putting his head down, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we're starting the list with Jim Brown and Walter Payton. I don't think anybody can deny that. So, Mike, what would you say would be the third name that would just pop into your head?
Well, another obvious choice to me, and somebody that retired somewhat early, not quite as early as Jim Brown, but what I think just played to the age of 30, Barry Sanders.
Yeah, I love Barry. I mean,
yeah.
Wow, what a player.
And if you I'm looking at Barry's stats right now, and I mean, again, my goodness, the touchdowns, the yardage.
Now, and we can say this, I think, because, the 3 of us, to differing degrees, are Cincinnati Bengals fans. So we can feel the pain of folks in Detroit. And
Yep.
Barry Sanders, I mean, did he ever even have a decent line to run behind?
I don't think so.
My God, yeah. His rookie season, he had 1,470. I mean,
Ooh.
The worst season this man ever had was 1993. He only had 1,115 yards, averaged 4.6 a carry. 3 touchdowns.
That was 11 games too.
Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious!
What a stud! I mean, that's all you can say. He was a stud.
My God, yeah. I mean, we know, and that's you know the names, you know how good they are, and that's why they're the first 3 brought up on the list. But then you look at the numbers, and I mean, I'm almost speechless. Wow,
Yep.
And he was just so fun to watch.
Yeah, he was so shifty. I mean, he was special, that's for sure.
Okay, well, and let's keep this rolling here. I'm going to go next, and I'm going to throw in one that I bring this gentleman up all the time. I don't hear too many people talk about him. Now, these first 3 are clear contenders to be the GOAT. But my selection here, a very short-lived career, sadly, is Beau Jackson.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I thought Beau Jackson was just out of this world. And I'm not going to say, well, he can't qualify because he only was able to play a few seasons. I don't think that's fair. I'm going to judge him on what he was able to. I mean, unless it's like Kajana Carter, for the Bengals that I don't think ever played, got hurt in preseason. As long as we have something to look at. So let's take a look here. How many seasons did Beau actually play in the NFL? So
4, I think.
Sadly for Beau, he had 4 what appeared to be injury-riddled seasons. Statistically, if you're looking at his yards, he never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. So I can see why he would be forgotten to some degree. But if you look at his yards per attempt,
Yep.
in his first season, he averaged 6.8. How do you do that? How's that even possible? 6.8.
You don't, but he did.
I mean, and you could say, well, I mean, what was it? When did he get hurt? Was it, 10 attempts and he broke a long one? It was a very short sample size, but it was still 81 attempts. 81, and he averaged 6.8.
It's insane.
Yeah, his final 2 seasons, he averaged 5.5 and 5.6. I mean, I just think he needs to be in the conversation. It's a shame that the injuries and lo and behold, bringing up that we're Bengals fans, it was the Bengals, sadly, that ended his career. But look at highlights of Beau Jackson. I mean, that's all you need to see. I mean, I've never seen anybody with that kind of size and speed in the same package. I mean, maybe Jim Brown was like that. I don't know how big he was compared to Beau, but I mean, just unbelievable talent for Beau Jackson.
And if we were to throw in more criteria and put like Tecmo Bowl in here, he would win. But
Absolutely.
I don't think that's part of the criteria.
Like Tecmo Bowl?
Oh, my gosh, yep.
Well, if we are possibly going to speak about Christian Okoye as well, I guess you'd bring up Tecmo Bowl. But we'll get to that later. Okay, so I brought Beau to the table. His stats aren't going to lend him to be in the Elite 8, but I think he deserves to be in the conversation, and I had to get that name out because I just think he was fantastic. So, Marty, who do you think would be next to be considered?
Well, I tend to lean more old school, as you guys know. So these guys from the 70s and 80s are the ones that I'm more partial to. But man, oh man, how about another guy who had a not a real long career? Well, how about Eric Dickerson?
If you wouldn't have said him, he probably would have been the next one that I would have brought up.
Yeah, I mean, he as well was just such a mix of everything: the size, speed, the shiftiness, and the moves. Yeah, look at his stats. I mean, look at his first even 2 years.
They're almost laughable. They're so unbelievable.
Gosh.
You would have thought it was a 30-game season, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
it was 16.
I mean, come on.
His first 4 years, he damn near averaged 1,800 yards or more, aside from that paltry 1985 season where he only rushed for 1,200 yards.
And it was only 14 games.
Damn.
I wonder, was he the first NFL rusher to eclipse the 2,000-yard mark? I seem to think
he was.
That was the case.
Yeah, and then his record was broken, I believe.
Let me double check, but I don't think it was him, actually. Give me a sec here.
I mean, you would think.
Nope, it was not.
Was it first?
Nope, in 1973,
the Juice,
O.J. Simpson,
okay.
rushed for just over, it was 2,003 yards, 1973.
Okay.
So, yep, OJ was the first to do it. Possibly more on him to come later.
Well, or we'll have to censor out the name, but
Yeah, well, and in all honesty, let's touch on that real quick. Because I still think guys like Terrell Owens really got shortchanged. Pete Rose is just terribly shortchanged. It just needs to be what these guys did on the field. I'm not looking at them morally. What they did on the field. If they're one of the greatest running backs of all time, they're one of the greatest running backs. They could have been a real shit person, but in OJ's case, I don't even know if that would describe it. But I'm just going to go with what they did on the field. So, just wanted to throw that in there.
Yep.
So Eric Dickerson, absolutely on the list.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, who are you thinking next?
The next person that came to mind for me, would be Emmitt Smith.
Nice.
Yeah.
His name popped into my head. I think he is the all-time rushing leader currently. At least
is. And I try to.
But when you look at his stats, man, I didn't realize how good he actually. I mean, I knew he was good, but when you look at his stats, the consistency. I mean, and of course, the numbers aren't as flashy as some of these other guys where he was eclipsing 1,900 yards every season, but he did have a couple of seasons in there where he broke 1,700 yards. In 1995, he rushed for over 1,700 yards and 25 touchdowns.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, I mean that could be one of the greatest rushing seasons of all time. With this 20 in the year before he had 21 touchdowns. But if you look, and not to take away from the greatness that obviously was Emmitt Smith, but he was certainly more of a workhorse running back. I mean, 368 carries in 94, followed up by 377 in 95.
Yeah.
I don't know. He almost deserves equal credit for keeping his body in shape. I don't know how he did that.
And I'm surprised, with Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and the other talent they had around him, I don't know if they felt like maybe it was just, quote unquote cowboy football, smash mouth football. I don't know why they felt like they had to work him so hard when you had you obviously had a top-notch quarterback. You had one of the best receivers of all time.
Yeah, I mean, to give this man a little bit further credit, he was 5'9", 221 pounds.
He was a tank.
I mean, 5'9", 220. How did he take that beating and just kept coming back? I mean, I know they used the fullback a lot in Dallas, but still.
The Moose.
You're hit on every play when you're the running back unless you make it into the end zone. So, yeah, I mean, numbers just blow your mind here. Emmitt certainly deserves to be on this list.
Agreed.
So let's see. That was 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's back to me. Okay, now it's starting to get tricky now, to be honest with you. But I do have one that popped into my mind earlier, and I made a note of it. Well, actually, I had two. But I'm going to say Marshall Faulk. So let's go ahead and do a deep dive on Marshall. Now, I know he was certainly one of the greatest two-way players, meaning running and receiving of all time.
I'd say he was the most versatile of anybody so far.
Now, has anybody ever eclipsed what he did in 1999? When he had 1,381 yards rushing and 1,048 yards receiving.
Yeah, that's a special season.
How in God's name?
And I don't know. I mean, did he win the MVP that year? Because goodness gracious.
Well, if he didn't, it had to be Kurt Warner. So, I mean, I would think it almost had to be him.
He won the MVP in 2000. So he was the MVP in 2000. Somehow
Yeah.
he didn't win it in 99.
He had a lot more touchdowns in 2000, but man, yeah, whew, that 99 season is
Yeah, that's
mind blowing.
it's so good. It's like you said, it's almost funny, but
And he was very good. And if you look at his Indianapolis days, he was very good. His final season with Indianapolis, his average yards per carry were never anything great. I mean, I think anything over 4 is pretty damn impressive, but 1,319 yards his last year with the Colts. Man, you talk about a resurgence. He went to St. Louis and just tore it up his first 3 seasons in that, greatest show on turf offense.
yeah, you know why? Because they couldn't stack the box like
Yeah.
they could at Indianapolis.
I mean, they plucked a man from a grocery store and stuck him behind as a quarterback, and
Yep.
lo and behold, it turned out to be Kurt Warner, and the rest is history.
Speaking of which, like we said, Marshall Faulk was the 2000 MVP, the 1999 NFL MVP, Curtis Eugene Warner.
Okay, so
Nice.
with those numbers from Marshall, I figured if he didn't win it, it had to be
so it was
Warner.
Kurt.
So, yeah, I just, again, taking a look at these stats here. Whew, yeah, Marshall certainly deserves consideration, no doubt about that.
Damn.
Yep.
And Kurt Warner won it again in 2001. So for 3 years, it was a Los Angeles Ram that was the NFL MVP. That shows you how good that team was for that little period of time.
Heck
Goodness gracious. The greatest show on turf.
They were fun to watch.
Yep, absolutely. I was just getting ready to say the same thing. And a lot of times in sports, that means a lot to fans. I can be a Bengals fan, but you wouldn't want to miss a Rams game because they're fun to watch. There's an intrigue. I always harken back to the UNLV Running Rebels back in the day with Jerry Tarkanian and, Plastic Man and Grandmama. I'm a UC Bearcat fan, but man alive, I never wanted to miss UNLV when they were on TV because they were just exciting, explosive, fun to watch. So yeah, it's something special when you have teams like that can put together, 2, 3, Loyola Marymount, back in the day when poor Hank Gathers passed away, and that whole storyline. I mean, my God, averaging 140 points a game in college, and just so exciting. It was must-see TV, I guess is the best way to put it. So, Cincinnati Reds, wire to wire. Let's not forget about them with the Nasty Boys.
Yep.
Okay, so Marshall Faulk certainly deserves consideration here, and we now have a list of 7, and we'll keep going just so we have some names to play with here. But Marty, you're next.
Well, how about here's one that I don't think is as flashy, but again, I definitely tend to skew towards like my childhood and stuff like that. But his numbers aren't quite as flashy, but he was darn consistent. How about Tony Dorsett?
Oh, yeah, that's a good call.
I'm not, a Cowboys guy, but Tony Dorsett was as consistent can be throughout his career.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he was a beast, and I think he held like the longest run for several years or something, maybe.
He had 99 yards. Man, I'm exhausted just thinking about that.
I can't. Just looking at his stats here, well, it looks like he had some injury issues. But yeah, very, very consistent. Obviously, a good pass catcher as well. So in that Marshall Faulk mold, or Marshall was in the Tony Dorsett mold, I guess we should say. Yeah, I mean, certainly deserves consideration. I'm just kind of looking at. It's funny. You look at Tony Dorsett, and by any standard, you're like, well, he's a Hall of Famer. And you're looking at these numbers like, man, they're great. But after you get done looking at Eric Dickerson, and Barry Sanders, you're like, yeah, they're okay.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, certainly deserved consideration. Great two-way player. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, some phenomenal seasons. I mean, 1981, 1,646 yards rushing on 4.8 a carry. I don't know how you get 342 rushing attempts and only score 4 TDs, but they must have used a fullback in his day too. I'm assuming. But yeah, then
Like
32.
Newsome?
I don't think Newsome was a tight end, right?
Not Ozzie Newsome, but didn't they have a fullback Newsome? I'm
Oh.
not positive.
Do you
but
remember that from the old video games?
I'm just trying to remember old school. But
That could be. Yeah, I guess I was thinking of Ozzy.
who was a stud as well.
Oh, heck yeah. That's for another podcast.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me go ahead and type in Tony Dorsett, and we will add him to our possibilities.
And it looks like who you might have been thinking of, Marty, was Robert Newhouse.
Maybe it is Newhouse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so close, yeah.
Well, there you go. Shout out to
Newhouse.
Robert Newhouse, deservedly so. All right. Well, Mike, who would you be thinking of next, if anybody?
Oh, yeah, I've got somebody that I was just looking at a list of some of the all-time running backs, and I believe this individual is, I don't know if he was in the top 5. If not, he's definitely in the top 10. And looking at the stats here, I know why. LaDainian Tomlinson.
Wow.
A more recent selection, so not, obviously not as old school as Dickerson, Dorsett, obviously Jim Brown, but my goodness, when you look at this man's stats, again,
LaDainian is,
phenomenal.
again, I don't even need to look at the stats to remember that he was of that Marshall Faulk mold as well, where he was a dual threat big time.
I mean, 2006, he did have over 500 yards receiving, which is still, I mean, even though it's not Marshall Faulk impressive, it's still impressive for a running back. But rushing, 1,800 yards, 28 touchdowns,
Gee, many Christmas.
113 yards a game.
So let's go ahead and hope that he was the 2006 NFL MVP.
I mean, that is, man.
Yeah, his numbers here are mind-blowing. I mean, first year, 1,200 yards. Second year, nearly 1,700. And third year, 1,645. I mean...
And he was the MVP in 2006, luckily, because otherwise he got robbed, if not after that season. My goodness.
Yeah, and it looks like he had some injuries in 2009, which then carried on. Well, then he went to the Jets, which, again, Jets fans, we feel your pain, again, because we're Bengals fans. So the Jets, the Bengals, Detroit, we're all in the same boat here. We can never catch a break, and our ownership is stellar, etc. So, but yeah, wow. Yeah, LaDainian, unbelievable. He just got added to the list.
Nice.
LaDainian, you just made the list.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Okay, so what I'm going to do here then, now that it's back to me, is just take a quick rundown here of the NFL's rushing leaders historically. So we know number 1 is Emmitt Smith. Number 2 is Walter Payton. Number 3 is Frank Gore.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I mean, I like Frank. Obviously, again, speaking of the great teams that were must-see TV, we're talking about the U back in the day. But he wouldn't pop into my head as one of the greats. We can look at his stats.
Playing?
I believe he is. I believe he's still playing.
What a stud.
He was as of last year.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So
the ripe old age of 37. Goodness. But he was still getting it done.
Talk about taking care of your body.
I mean, not rushing for the big yards anymore, but I'm sure he's obviously not going to be an every down back at that age either. But, I mean, last year, 37, he rushed for over 650 yards, which
Oh,
is
damn.
still not bad. He's
No, not at all.
for being that old. I mean, he's never been a big touchdown machine. It looks like 2009 he rushed for 10 touchdowns. That was the only season he broke double digits. So he's never been a big touchdown guy on the ground, obviously, but I mean, yeah, he
Okay.
is
Well, and
consistent,
we can come back to Frank.
but
Number
I'm with
4.
you. The name just it wasn't one of those names that automatically pops into my head when I think the best of all time, but
Yeah, exactly. Number 4, leading rusher of all time, Barry Sanders. Number 5 is where I get into some trouble. And I mentioned earlier that I'm only going to judge on the field. Let me
yes.
have a disclaimer here. The guys that, like cheating, you have to consider that. What did they do to cheat? Did it skew the stats? That's why I feel strongly with Pete Rose that it's just a screw job because he didn't do anything to hurt the game. A-Rod hurt the game. Mark McGuire hurt the game. Roger Clemens hurt the game. Pete Rose didn't hurt the game. And I don't think any of those other guys are in the Hall of Fame either, but I'm just saying I could see them getting in and Pete Rose still being left out because he bet on games. I mean, in the whole hierarchy of things you could do that were detrimental to the game, I think betting on your team to win is not anything that's overly harmful. And then you got the guys that, obviously murder folks or beat their girlfriends or wives, and it's just despicable, hideous things. And again, we're trying to just judge on the field. But I have a soft spot. And when it comes to doing things to children, that's where it's hard for me to look the other way. I'm going to try to do that in this case. I'll pull up Adrian's numbers.
I was going to say, because I actually have his pulled up right now because he came up earlier, but then, LaDainian kind of popped up too, and his stats are undeniable, but...
Yeah, I mean, and Adrian's on the field. Just what he's doing on the field. I mean, first 4 seasons, just incredible. I mean, his first season, and he only played 14 games, and incredible.
I mean, even
one of the rare guys that has a 2,000-yard season, which I think we all remember that back in 2012.
Even that 2011 season, I know that was the season where he tore his knee. He almost eclipsed 1,000 yards then. He only played 12 games. But then look, 2012, he came back from I forget if it was torn MCL, ACL, might have been all 3. But he came back and rushed for almost 2,100 yards, not even a year removed from reconstructive knee surgery, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, let's hope that Joe Burrow can have the same kind of bounce back this season.
Not only a bounce back, but over 2,000 yards. My goodness, rushed for 131 yards a game, which is impressive.
Yeah, and then he bounced back again, if you want to call it that, after an injury-riddled season of 2014 and had a magnificent 2015.
14, I don't know if that was injury. That may have been the season that he was suspended
for
the off-the-field stuff.
Okay.
Because I think it was right around that time.
It's going to be hard to discern because he then bounced around and played minimal games here and there. Hell, it looks like one season he played for 2 teams, Arizona and New Orleans. Now he's with Washington, and I don't even know what his age is now, but I mean, he had a very good season. Or I guess he's with Detroit now.
Yeah, even the last couple of seasons, he's 35. At the age of 34 with Washington, he just missed out on breaking 900 yards. He rushed for 898. Last year, at the age of 35 with Detroit, 604 yards, which again, at an age where running backs typically slow down once they hit their early 30s
Oh yeah.
to be putting up even 600 yards when you're in your mid to late 30s is still impressive because,
Yeah.
my
Yep. So
goodness.
certainly, I'm going to go ahead and I'll make Adrian my selection. I'll add him to the list. Just taking on the field. So Marty, you would now, and just to update you guys, we have 3, 9, 10, 11, we have 13 guys. So maybe we all want to just go one more round, and then we'll start whittling this down to the Elite 8, and then we'll rank them 1 through 8 at that point as well. So who would your last selection be? Or I take that back. We can, because I started it, right? And I do have one that I want to say. So I'll get one more. You guys get 2 more. But go ahead, Marty.
Boy,
If you have anybody you do want to add, if you think anybody is really deserving.
well, I mean, there's still, several names of legendary running backs. But we're talking about what we think are the greatest running backs of all time. We're covering pretty much, the main meat of that topic, but man, I'm trying to think here who I'd add. Again, I do like to skew towards, more of the 70s and 80s guys, but I'm almost stumped here. What about? I mean, what if we throw someone in there like Marcus Allen? I mean,
He certainly has the name factor. There's no doubt about that. Let's take a look here.
Talk about versatile. Look at. I know he had some seasons where he was as much a receiver as he was a running back. I mean,
yeah, his numbers aren't going to.
They're not like anybody else on this
wow
list.
You.
For sure.
But I mean, he certainly was versatile. I mean, yeah, I'm not. Let's not even look at the rushing attempts. I'm just going to look at him as a receiver. I mean, hell, his second, third, and fourth years in the NFL, he had 68 receptions, 64, and 67.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
yep.
that's a high-end wide receiver. Let alone that in his greatest season, 1985, the man had 380 carries for 1,759 yards with 11 TDs, and then he also had 67 receptions for 555 yards and an additional 3 touchdowns. So that's one of the great all-time seasons right there, 85. Holy mackerel. But man, that was like he never came close to matching that season.
And I think he had a mix of also some injuries, but then look who he was kind of playing in tandem with. You had Beau for a few seasons. Who else did they have? Didn't they have another top tier that he shared the backfield
well, when he went
with?
to the Chiefs, was that when they had maybe either Christian or who was
Barry
the other
Word
stud?
or...
No. They had another stud running back, Priest Holmes.
Oh, Priest was a stud.
So I don't know if they were there as well and they shared duties, but anyway, we're focused here on Marcus. And then I start thinking, wow, should we discuss Christian Okoye and Priest Holmes? But Marcus, I think, is worthy to be mentioned. I don't know if he's going to make our Elite 8, but in terms of versatility, he's probably a top 3 or 4 running back if you look at it in terms of running and catching of all time, or at least very close to a top 4.
Absolutely.
And again, Hall of Famer, so did something right. Mike, who would you be thinking of next? Maybe we lost Mike?
I did hear a thud before.
We'll edit that. I accidentally muted.
Oh, that's all right.
My apologies. Well, I'm going to kind of throw 2 names out here because the first name that popped into my head was actually Earl Campbell.
Oh,
kind of going old school.
Earl. I love Earl Campbell.
Earl popped in, but then I have another name I was that again popped into my head. And looking at this second guy's stats, my God, again, Earl, especially the first, 5, 6 seasons. I mean, there was an injury. Well, I'm assuming or actually, that might have been the strike season. 1982 may have been the strike season. Because I've seen a few guys that were kind of down in 1982. But aside from that, Earl's first 5 or 6 years were fantastic.
Oh my God. Yeah, just unbelievable. Yeah, I'm so thankful you mentioned Earl Campbell. I don't know if I would have remembered Earl Campbell, which it's funny because of the Houston Oilers, in the Bengals division, growing up in Cincinnati, always watching the Bengals. I was a Houston Oilers fan. Why might you ask? What the heck would you be a Houston Oilers fan as a kid? I loved Earl Campbell. I just thought he was the greatest. I wish to this day I had a wooden Houston Oilers helmet that was made for me, and I don't know whatever happened to it. It's a shame. I'd give anything to find that. But
oh, yep, I remember it.
Yeah, I mean Earl Campbell. Quite possibly still my favorite running back of all time. Talk about a man giving his body to the sport.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Literally.
just ferocious, a savage, I guess is the best way to put it. So entertaining. I mean, wow.
That's
probably the closest thing to Jim Brown that you're going to see. But yes, definitely Earl Campbell is on the list. I'm so thankful you brought him up. And yeah, not the long career of the other guys, but I don't want to judge it by that. I just want to judge it by as long as we have a decent little sample of what they did on the field. And you said you had another name, which...
because I said Earl was the first one. I looked at his stats, and like I said, the first, especially 5, 6 years, fantastic. But then another name that popped up, and I felt like I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on this guy, because I feel like, again, it's a name that kind of flies under the radar, but this man, the stats were just, again, a beacon of consistency. Curtis Martin.
Oh, yeah.
So Jets fans, we have discussed that we're with you in terms of the pain you feel.
I mean, and he didn't have he had a couple of seasons where he, actually a couple where he eclipsed 1,500 yards. He didn't have the 1800 to 2,000 yard seasons or the.
And why in the heck did the New England Patriots ever get rid of that man?
But when you look, every year aside from that last season, which he missed 4 games, and he rushed for over 700 yards still.
Look at his, coming out of the backfield, he was a pretty darn good receiver too. I mean, he put up some numbers as well.
Yep, another very impressive dual threat guy for sure.
I feel like that's one of those names that you don't really hear a whole lot when you talk about running backs. It's usually, like I said, Jim Brown or, Faulk, Dickerson, Sanders, Payton, but you don't really.
Well, he's the 6th, greatest, if you will, rusher of all time in terms of yards. He would have been next on the list right after Adrian Peterson. So, yeah, I mean, certainly deserves consideration. Taking a look at his stats here, you're like, okay, wow, maybe he deserves more than consideration because, these are extremely impressive numbers. And I'll say it again, it means a little bit more to me as a Bengals fan. This guy did this on the Jets, or that Barry Sanders was able to do it on Detroit. And I'm being completely honest because these are, unfortunately, just not great. We probably have the 3 greatest fan bases in all of the NFL, but we're just not rewarded. Nope. And it's mostly due to ownership and coaching choices. But if you go to one of these franchises and you're able to do what Curtis Martin did, it deserves extra consideration. It really does.
He was fantastic.
So with that being said, I'm going to go into my last selection here because, and I wanted to make sure I gave myself one more because I talk about this guy all the time. and half the people never even heard of him. And I think, and it's exactly, he fits into the mold of Curtis Martin and Barry Sanders with the Jets in Detroit, and I'm going to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh,
my
nice.
next pick.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Dillon.
Yep.
The 20th, I think he's the only top 20 rushing leader not in the Hall of Fame. And again, it happens all the time to Bengals. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bengals started in the NFL, I think in 62 or 63. It was something in that early 60s era. We have one Hall of Famer.
Yep.
And you're like, well, you guys suck. No, we got guys that you put their stats next to, like I just had a comparison with Troy Polamalu. Who would dispute that he's not one of the greats and should be in the Hall of Fame? Nobody would.
Nope.
I'm a Bengals fan, and that guy was phenomenal. Ken Riley. His stats blow Troy Polamalu out of the water. He never even got a sniff at the Hall of Fame. How is that? I mean, because you're a Bengal, you just don't qualify? We have Anthony Munoz in the Hall of Fame.
Deservedly so.
So, with that being said, Corey Dillon is going to get mentioned. And Corey Dillon, what he did in another long span of putrid Bengal teams with no offensive line whatsoever, he was amazing. Literally just amazing to watch. Carried us to some semblance of remote respectability in those seasons.
And then I'm trying to remember, because obviously the Bengals never had an all-time, mainly focusing on that time period. It's not like we had a superstar Hall of Fame quarterback either. I mean, who was the quarterback during that time frame? Was it Jeff Blake maybe at one point, or Neil O'Donnell?
Yeah, or it was David Klingler. I don't know who he had.
I was going to say, we had some brutal seasons.
And part of that might have also been, like you touched on, the offensive line. So,
I mean, David Klingler,
some of those guys, but
certainly had a unique system. But in terms of just numbers, I think he was the greatest passer in the history of college football at the time.
Because you don't have an offensive line.
And he came into the Bengals without an offensive line, just like poor Joe Burrow, and just got destroyed.
Can I add one thing just real quick, too? And this is for any Cincinnati Bengals fans who may be listening to our podcast. Corey Dillon is not revered in Cincinnati. A lot of people still really dislike him, especially that he left. He went to New England and won a Super Bowl ring. I 100% understand where Corey Dillon was coming from. I mean, he gave his body to this team, and he played hard every game. And literally everyone knew, inside the organization, outside the fans, that this team was not building a championship caliber team. I do not blame Corey Dillon one bit, and therefore I hold zero hostility. Good for you, Corey.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have a lasting image of Corey Dillon walking off the field for the last time as a Bengal. I believe he took his shoulder pads and jersey off and threw them in the stands. And I was happy. I was happy because he deserved it.
Yep.
And when I heard that New England signed him, I was happy because he deserved it. He deserved everything he gave Cincinnati. I'm not going to go down a whole different path here for long, but I am going to for 30 seconds to a minute here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are a Bengals fan, as Marty mentioned, we might be enjoying Joe Burrow for 2 more years. I would not be shocked if he left. And I wouldn't be angry, because I think we have a guy now that could take us to the Super Bowl. And is he so important to the Bengals and so important to the city through the Bengals' eyes that we would get him a very good a top 15, 13 offensive line? No. We made like one move. And it's a bunch of recycled guys. After his knee just got effing destroyed, if you don't mind me saying. What did we do to protect this kid? Very little. And it's an embarrassment. So if he leaves, I'm going to be happy for him, and where he goes, they will be my new favorite team. But yeah, Corey Dillon absolutely should have left. I commend him for leaving. He got a Super Bowl ring, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it was in his first season or not. His first season with New England, though, he tore it up. Man, did he bounce back. Might have been his greatest season ever. I mean, he was...
It was, yeah. When you're looking at the stats, and it's no coincidence because he had an offensive line. Yeah, 1,600 plus yards, 109 yards a game, which was the only season he eclipsed 100, 12 touchdowns, which wasn't his best. Actually, his last season, he had 13 touchdowns. So, but yeah, best season by far, and it was coincidentally the first one in New England.
Yeah, man, what he was when he got there and saw their offensive line, he was probably like, "Oh my God, what a treat this is." So anyway, had to be mentioned. I wasn't going to stop this episode without adding him to the list, at least for consideration, because
he was my next.
What he did for the city and what he was able to do, as I mentioned, along with Curtis Martin, on such poor teams, I mean, it means even more. It really does. So anyway, Marty, you've got one more. Mike, you've got one more. I'm sorry that I stole yours, Marty, but anybody
That's all
else?
Right. Well, I guess I'll go a little more current here, and someone that I think is definitely deserves to at least be in a discussion with his, stats. The Edge, Adrian James. I mean, we know he was a stud in college, but look at his first couple years in the league. He then had some injuries, but his first 2 years, he rushed for over 1,500 yards, had 13 touchdowns. Then when he gets healthy again, like in 2003 and 4, I mean, look at his. I mean, he had some darn good years, and then I always also love to focus on the receiving aspect. And again, I mean, he had 50 receptions a year, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, the all-purpose yards, as I call them, I mean, his rookie season, and he had to be Rookie of the Year, but his rookie season and his second season, he was well over 2,000 yards. And then he bounced back again in 2004, had over 2,000 all-purpose yards. Damn near did it again the following year in 2005. So, yeah, and then he went to Arizona and had a really good first 2 seasons with Arizona. Very good. But, then injuries and the beating take their toll after a while. And finished up with Seattle with a forgettable season, sadly. But, I mean, Adrian James, big part of those dominant, Colts teams with, of course, Peyton Manning. So kind of in the mold of Marshall Faulk with The Greatest Show on Turf. Pretty similar offensive styles.
Yep.
All right, so Adrian James is going to make at least the consideration here for discussion. One more guy is going to make this initial list. We're going to then quickly whittle down to 8 and then rank them 1 through 8. Mike, who is the last guy that we're going to be considering?
Let's see. Well, I was just kind of looking at the list here of the all-time leading rushers, and I think just kind of by default,
Don't say it.
Yeah, don't say what I think you're going to say.
No, I think actually this guy's number 15.
Oh,
this is the only person we haven't really touched on yet in the top 15. But Franco Harris.
Well, since you said that, we did not touch on number 8 either, which is the bus.
Oh, I'm sorry. I completely,
and I was saying that as a Bengals fan, but greatness cannot be, forgotten about. So let's go ahead then, just for what and giggles.
Actually, man,
take a look at Jerome and Franco's stats.
That's what I'm.
Now, one thing I will say, as a Bengals fan, it's hard to say too many nice things about the Steelers, but Jerome Bettis, just as a human being, seemed like the nicest damn guy you'd ever want to meet. I mean,
Yeah.
so he seemed like a great person. And Jerome started his career with the Rams, and went on to
Actually, I
hit.
guess Jerome's stats, I apologize for overlooking him because he played. Oh, actually, he played more games, though, didn't he? Because he did have more yardage, but he also played, what, looks like 19 more games. So they're both very comparable, but they both had the exact same number of touchdowns
Yeah, the
in their
Bus had
career.
like the 96 and 97, his first 2 years with the Steelers. He had phenomenal seasons. 3,000 yards, more than 3,000 yards combined in those 2 seasons. It's funny, though, kind of looking at the numbers. I would have thought he'd have bigger touchdown numbers because he was so big.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
he was like a hybrid running back, fullback, kind of like an Ickey Woods, just from a Bengals perspective. But yeah, I mean, Jerome certainly a solid running back. I mean, whew,
Oh yeah.
very, very good. And again, I will be unbiased. He certainly deserves consideration. And then we talked Franco Harris as well. So let's take a quick look here at Franco before we start whittling down our list.
Franco had a lot of consistency throughout, especially later in his career.
Yeah, Franco did. Never had a huge breakout. I mean, I guess 75, 1,246 yards rushing, and then he added 200 or
14 game seasons. Yep.
28 receptions.
But I mean, look at 83, 33 years old. He still had over 1,000 yards. I mean, that's impressive.
My God, yeah.
And 34 receptions.
In the 84 season in Seattle, I don't really know why that even happened. He should have just retired a Steeler.
Yeah.
But, yeah, wow. And an all-time name. I mean, you can't talk about, and the iconic.
Oh, yeah.
What, God.
Immaculate reception.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking miracle, but yes. The immaculate reception where he finger-tipped it right before it hit the ground, and that's a lasting image with all NFL fans. So, all right. Well, we've looked at the numbers. We have added, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17 names. We are going to whittle this 17 down to 8 here, and then we're going to take that 8, and we will, as quickly as we can, whittle that into a ranking of 1 through 8, which is what we do best here in the Tournament Podcast. We rank. So I would think we can all just, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine we can all agree that we can literally start and say without question on our Elite 8, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, and Eric Dickerson have to be on the Elite 8.
No argument at all for me on this.
I mean,
yeah,
otherworldly stats from these guys, just mind-blowing stuff.
So that was what, Jim Brown, Barry, Eric Dickerson, and Walter Payton?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think you can argue with those 4 guys, so.
Okay, so then that leaves us with a whole bunch here to finish out 4. I will go in myself, and I will say that, do you guys agree with me that as much as I'm glad we mentioned the name, but Beau Jackson probably should be removed, just from, unfortunately, what he was able to do. We have the sample, and I know he dealt with a lot of injuries, but just his stats, I think Beau, it was more the promise of what, well, that's the wrong way to put it, but you know what I mean, his what he could have possibly done.
Oh my God. If he didn't play, baseball and was only playing football, I think he would he would be in the top 5 of all time.
Yeah, if
No
he would have never
question.
been injured. I just think what he was able to do in that short period of time doesn't warrant him being on the Elite Eight of our list, or our list of Elite Eight, I should say.
I agree.
So I'm going to go ahead and just take it upon myself to remove Beau. But I'm glad we talked about him. He is, some of the greatest clips you're ever going to see.
So, pardon me. We've got so far, obviously, Jim Brown. And who were the others that we had here?
Yep, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, and Eric Dickerson are firmly entrenched. Now, we'll rank them, however, but in terms of the Elite Eight, they're already in.
Gotcha.
So now we need 4 between Emmitt Smith, Marshall Faulk, Tony Dorsett, LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, Marcus Allen, Earl Campbell, Curtis Martin, Corey Dillon, Edgerrin James, Jerome Bettis, and Franco Harris. Is there anybody else of that group that I just read off of, whatever that was, 10 or so names, that you think should just be deleted from consideration?
It should be deleted.
Or we can do it another way. So I just read off, again, I think 10 or 11 names. We have 4. Who of that remaining group do you guys think would be? Okay, clearly I think they would be the next guy on that list.
Man, I would say Emmitt Smith would definitely be one of the guys that would have to be included. Again, just the consistency. I mean, my goodness. Not only being the top rushing or the all-time rushing leader, but my goodness, just I kind of pulled his stats up here again, and he did it for, 10, 11, 12 seasons, either eclipsing 1,000 or a couple seasons he just fell short of 1,000. I mean, yeah, Emmitt Smith was a beast. So
now, if you use ProFootballReference.com, and when you click on the player's stats, if you scroll down a little bit right below their stats, there's a compare feature, and you can actually type in another running back, so that might be helpful in this too. So what I'm going to do, and why I'm bringing that up, is here we've got, let's take Marshall Faulk, who was next. So I'm going to click on Marshall Faulk, go to the Pro Football Reference, and then I'm going to, and actually it pops up, so I'm going to compare Marshall Faulk to LaDainian Tomlinson. Hit compare and see what we've got here. So, so Marshall Faulk, they break it down in kind of an odd way. So
Boy,
this may not be
got even yards per carry, but Tomlinson has a good amount more touchdowns.
Yes, he absolutely does.
But the receptions, Marshall Faulk definitely. Yeah, that's
a toughie.
It is a tough one. I mean, these two guys are both one and the same. I mean, 45 touchdown difference is big, but so is, basically 150 receptions.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put them like in a little block here by themselves for the time being. So if we jump back in here, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now there's 10 left. I'm going to try to whittle this down. Do you guys agree with me, or would you have a problem with? And no, I'm not saying this because I'm biased. If we would just right out of the top here remove Marcus Allen, Jerome Bettis, and Franco Harris. I just don't think the wowing numbers of what we're going to consider the Elite Eight, I don't think these guys had those.
Marcus Allen, Jerome, and who was the third one?
Franco.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, these guys are all, I mean,
Well, they're Hall of Famers. I
yeah,
mean, so
superstars.
can't take anything away from them, but I'm just saying for our Elite 8 of the greatest 8, I mean, they could be 9, 10, and 11, but I just don't think they'd make the cut at 8.
No, I agree. Just, again, they're Hall of Famers, superstars, some of the best of all time, but we're looking at the top 8. So that's fair enough.
Okay, so we have 4 that are in. We have Marshall and LaDainian kind of just dangling in the wind at the moment. And I think I miscounted before. That's going to leave us with 6 remaining guys here to... So let's just try to take one of these 6. One of these guys to bump up into the list. And this is going to be between Tony Dorsett, Adrian Peterson, Earl Campbell, Curtis Martin, Corey Dillon, Edgerrin James. Who of that group would be just of like a gut? You'd say, I think they're in. I know who I would say, but is there anybody you guys would say?
I know I would say Earl had like the flashier numbers for a shorter span of time. But after looking at what Curtis Martin did over a more prolonged period of time, it's, again, I know the numbers weren't as high or as flashy, but the consistency, especially at that position, really impresses me. I almost want to move Curtis Martin up there, and I think it's safe to say he's probably not going to win, but still, just the fact that he was so productive for so long, it's such a difficult position. The physicality, that really impresses me. So I'm kind of putting my vote behind Curtis Martin to get bumped up here, but...
Well, so let's take a look here. Let me do a, again, using Pro Football Reference. Let's take Curtis Martin, and let's go ahead and bump him up against, of what we have left, maybe Adrian Peterson. And let's see how they work out here. So there's Adrian, still going strong. At least I believe he is.
Yeah, I think he might be a free agent right now, but he was playing as of, obviously last season, and I believe he said that he would like to keep playing, so...
Adrian has better yards per attempt. It's funny. Let's see here.
I mean, yeah, Adrian's
Curtis
numbers are...
played in 12 less games, but only has 700 less rushing yards, which, that, I guess, about evens out. Receiving, certainly Curtis Martin was a better receiver. Touchdowns, a lot.
Yeah,
He's
got
Adrian.
A lot more touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, wow. Looking at this, I would almost say, then do we just add Curtis Martin and Adrian Peterson with our initial 4, or I guess our initial 5, which would be Jim, Walter, Barry, Eric, and Emmitt. We can always slide one out, but I mean, I think they're both deserving. I mean, I'm looking at these numbers like, gee, many Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, both
and if we're going to slide one out, it probably is going to be Curtis. Just looking at them head to head, Adrian, his numbers are more impressive. I hate to do that to Jets fans because, again, I feel the pain, but...
Yeah, I mean, even if he doesn't make it, obviously Curtis Martin is, and again, this, obviously this is all subjective. This is just our opinion. Curtis Martin, though, you can't deny he's definitely, a top, I don't know if he's
top
15,
10 at the
20,
very least.
yeah.
So, but this is an Elite 8, and we just do this because it's a reverse tournament, and we kind of build backwards. And if you were able to start a tournament, you pretty much need 4, 8, 16, etc.
Yeah.
So we just kind of chose 8, so the podcast doesn't go too long. That's just what we do here. So, so we'll go ahead and we'll just slide them up into consideration at the moment.
Okay.
So that's going to have us then with Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, Eric Dickerson, Emmitt Smith, Adrian Peterson, and Curtis Martin to be 7 of our Elite 8. Marshall Faulk and LaDainian Tomlinson are in a little block on the outside. And that leaves us with, and I guess let's just see, do we think any of these remaining four strongly deserve to be in the Elite Eight? That would be Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, Corey Dillon, and Adrian James.
Oh, man.
Numbers-wise, I would think Adrian James would be the first one that would come to, as much as I want to say Corey, because, again, what he did behind a pitiful offensive line was just as impressive than what anybody else has done on this list. But
first one for me that came to mind was Tony, but that's more of a bias. But I mean, his numbers might not be as flashy, but
we're going to compare Tony Dorsett to Adrian James. Let's take a look here.
My pick right out of the gate for that 8th spot was going to be LaDainian Tomlinson.
Well, him and Marshall are in a separate block, kind of waiting. I'm just talking about this between Dorsett, Campbell, Dillon, and James. Do we just erase all four of them?
Oh, to eliminate?
Or does one of them deserve to be in consideration? You look at the numbers.
They're very
Tony
similar.
Dorsett and Adrian James are like the same guy, which impresses me even more for Tony because, he started back in the 70s. You tend to forget a little bit.
I'm a big Dorsett fan. I mean,
wow, they were really, really similar. I mean, Tony a little bit better yards per attempt. Adrian a few more TDs. Yeah. Tony a few more receiving TDs. A few more receiving yards. I mean, I guess on paper you'd give the slight edge to Tony Dorsett. But is this enough to get him in there to knock somebody like Curtis Martin or Adrian or Marshall Faulk or LaDainian out of the list?
Oh, out of the top 8?
Yes.
Oh, boy. I hate to say probably not. To me, in all seriousness, I would say Tony Dorsett would be maybe our 9, like the first guy out, because he's that good.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, Tony and Adrian are the same guy, so then that would apply to both guys. And nothing against them, it's just the other guys we have in here are just fantastic. Corey Dellen, 20th greatest running back of all time in terms of yards. Definitely deserved to be mentioned. I guess he's probably going to be left out. And Earl Campbell, again, as phenomenal as he was and as fun as he was to watch. Just looking at the numbers, he just doesn't quite get into the Elite 8.
No. Nope.
So I'll go ahead and we'll remove those 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 guys to make the Elite 8. Let's leave all 9 in there. And let's do this now. Let's go into our ranking. And at the end, it'll bump one guy out. So who are we going to rank as the number 1 running back in the history of the NFL? And this is tough.
Man, yeah. I mean, my gut tells me either Barry or Jim, but oh man,
I agree with what you're saying because Jim Brown is before our time even, but Jim Brown did all of this in what was it, 9 seasons?
Yeah, he never even, like I said, he retired at 29 years old, or maybe he had just turned 30. But
I mean, his worst season was his rookie season when he had, for him, a paltry 942 yards in 12 games, 4.7 a carry. I mean, statistically, Yeah, Jim Brown was a stud.
Yeah, I'm doing the comparison on the Football Reference here, and Barry's stats are a little higher. Actually, Barry has more yardage. Jim has more touchdowns. Barry was a better receiver, and had more receiving touchdowns. But on the flip side, Barry played like 35 more games than Jim did.
Yeah.
So
153 games for Barry versus only 118 for Jim Brown.
because I know Barry, I think, played one additional season, but I guess you got to keep in mind those were also 16 game seasons Barry played. Where when Jim was first playing, was it even?
They might have been
14
12
initially. Yeah. So that, man, yeah. I mean, I'm fine with going. I'd say Jim and Barry then would have to be 1 and 2.
All right. Well, that sounds good to me. And we can always change things. Nothing. Let's say we write these in pencil. They're not carved into stone. So we're going to say Jim Brown is 1, Barry Sanders 2 for the time being. Who do we think would be a nice fit for number 3 all time? And we got a heck of a list here.
Well, I could argue that Walter could be 1 or 2, but if not, he has to be 3 in my opinion.
I'm actually doing the quick comparison between him and Eric Dickerson.
That is what I was going to do too.
To see, because again,
Don't do it.
both, yeah. Well, right out of the gate, Walter played about 44 more games, it looks like. Walter did have more touchdowns, more yardage. The yards per carry were exactly the same at 4.4. And yeah, Walter was a much more prolific receiver as well out of the backfield. So overall, Walter's got the higher numbers in pretty much every category. Man, like I said, he played more games, but yeah.
Well, then are we comfortable at least starting out? So we'll go Walter 3, Eric 4.
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Then we've got Emmitt Smith, Adrian Peterson, Curtis Martin, Marshall Faulk, and LaDainian Tomlinson as 5 remaining to grab the next 4 spots. And we need a number 5 man here.
Emmitt has to be.
I was just going to say my first thought would be Emmitt Smith.
Yeah, he has to.
Again, I was going to do a quick comparison of him and LaDainian because LaDainian's stats were spectacular, but yeah, I mean, I mean, Emmitt Smith had over 18,000 yards in his career, damn near 164 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, LaDainian was a better receiver, but it's hard to overlook just what Emmitt did on the ground. My goodness, over 1,800 rushing yards. So yeah, Emmitt, Emmitt's got to be 5th.
Okay, so then let's see here. I'm going to compare, or if I can, I'm having some technical difficulties. Why is that not pulling up?
We said Jim Brown is 1, then we've got Barry as number 2.
Yeah, yep. Then we have Walter 3 and Eric rounding out our Mount Rushmore.
I've got to do this. I'm looking at Barry versus Walter, just to make me feel better.
Are you bothered by Walter not being 2nd?
Well, I just want to see. I mean, I would never, ever argue against Barry Sanders. But,
yet he is, people. Yet he is.
But I don't want to go against Walter. Yeah, Barry Sanders in less time, a lot less time. Put up like 11 more yards a game. Yeah, it's hard to argue against Barry.
I think we can agree, though, like starting out a team, you wouldn't turn either one of those guys away.
Oh, no.
Heavens, no.
That's what's, these, man.
Okay. Well, we've got our first 5, I think, pretty firmly entrenched. I don't think we're going to do a whole lot of moving here, so we need 6. And number 6 is either going to be Adrian Peterson, Curtis Martin, Marshall Faulk, or LaDainian Tomlinson. Since Marshall and LaDainian are kind of the same guy.
That's what I was about to do.
I'm doing a comparison of Adrian to Marshall. And actually, ironically, their games are about equal.
I'd
Adrian
imagine.
has a lot more rushing yards.
Oh, who are you doing? LaDainian and Adrian?
Adrian and Marshall.
Oh, okay.
And
we know Marshall's going to be a much better receiver without
he's
even
got
looking.
a ton more receiving yards, so it's hard to judge them. And again, Adrian, Marshall was part of a phenomenal team. I mean, Adrian certainly never played on a team to the caliber of the greatest show on turf.
Yeah, and I guess you got to take that into consideration too, because kind of like Corey Dillon.
Yes.
Adrian, not to say that Minnesota was as bad as
heck no.
our beloved Bengals were in the late 90s, because I wouldn't do that to Minnesota, or to Nikita Koloff.
Yep. Or to any other team. We're probably the worst.
Oh, yep.
But
I mean, this episode is great as running back. Now, even though one of the functions of a running back can be to, in the flats or to be a receiver, I mean, Peterson is clearly the dominant actual run.
And that's where it gets, because on the ground, Adrian was dominant, but then in the air, obviously, Marshall was much more prolific than Adrian was.
Yeah.
But then since we're talking about running back versus receiver, do we have to give the edge to Adrian because he did more on the ground?
I'd probably just these two against each other, I'd probably give a slight edge to Adrian, just in my opinion. So in doing that, I'm now going to compare LaDainian to Curtis and maybe help me figure out what I think the next move should be. And so Curtis Martin, again, games are about equal, so that makes this really, really easy. Curtis had more rushing yards. LaDainian was a little bit better average per carry.
Had a boatload more touchdowns. Goodness gracious.
LaDainian had more receiving yards. Okay,
I still do the per game as.
Yeah, that matchup, love Curtis Martin, but LaDainian, even though he didn't have as much yardage, he wasn't that far off. And then, my goodness, he had over 50 more touchdowns than Curtis did.
Yeah.
Obviously a better receiver. So I love Curtis and definitely feel like he deserves consideration, but LaDainian has to get the edge over Curtis, in my opinion.
How about with number 6? Could we agree that, or at least for now, Adrian Peterson will make him 6, and we'll make LaDainian 7? And we can always shuffle. I mean, there's nothing.
Yeah, I mean.
So then that would leave one spot remaining for Curtis Martin or Marshall Faulk.
Oh,
man. Which it sounds funny thinking that either one of these guys might be left off the list.
Yeah,
But let's see, and let's do our statistical comparison here, because sometimes it comes down to numbers. I want to err on the side of Jets fans because, again, we're in the same boat. But come on now, I'm not.
Here we are. Yep.
It's
the games aren't far off. Marshall played about 8 more games.
Curtis is definitely more of the actual ground game, but then when you look at the versatility of the receiving, it's quite obvious that that's Marshall. So,
but I wonder though if there's any running back. I'd imagine there's not a single running back on this entire list that is going to have better receiving numbers. Marshall's got to be maybe the best running back as far as receiving numbers go. I just can't imagine there's another running back that's got better receiving
I don't think
numbers.
Was too far off. I'd have to pull him back up, but
he would probably be the only one that would be comparable.
I mean, Curtis Martin, I mean, they played in the exact same era, too, which makes this a little bit easier.
Literally, they
Curtis
both retired in 05.
Had more yardage, but Marshall had more per carry. Had a ton more receptions. Whew.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd have to, I mean, in my opinion, God, I hate to do it only because I want to do something for the Jets fans.
I'm with you. I think
it has to be Marshall.
Even though I'm the one that threw Curtis out there, but yeah, I mean, when you take the yards per carry into consideration, so even though Curtis had more yardage,
And now some of this too, though, we have to understand, and I can't forget what I was initially talking about. Marshall Faulk was averaging 4.3 a carry, Curtis Martin 4. But Curtis Martin was playing behind inferior lines, I'm assuming. I can speak more clearly on the Bengals because that's what I've always watched, but I know we're pretty similar.
Sorry to hear that.
So I would imagine Curtis Martin was doing this behind pitiful offensive lines. People can certainly let us know in the comments, Jets fans, but so he would deserve a little bit more extra consideration there. The receiving ability, though, does kind of tip it in Marshall's favor because he was so deadly out of the backfield. Now, again, it was a system designed to throw to Marshall. So you're like, well, you can't penalize Curtis because the Jets weren't built to throw him the ball. But we've got to use some differentiation here. So I just think overall it just looks like Marshall would get a slight edge.
And I'd agree with that. I mean,
and we're being unbiased. If we weren't, Corey Dillon would be in our Elite Eight. So I'd have to say then Curtis Martin would be number 9, and Corey Dillon's probably 10.
Still not a bad place to be, 9 or 10 all time. So
let's try to be as quick as we can here, guys, because I don't want the podcast to go too long. Our Elite Eight, we are saying, is Jim Brown, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, Eric Dickerson, Emmitt Smith, Adrian Peterson, LaDainian Tomlinson, and Marshall Faulk, in that order. So we're saying Jim is the GOAT, joined on Mount Rushmore by Barry, Walter, and Eric. What do you think of that ranking of 1 through 8?
I don't really have, and I could see some people having an issue with Emmett not making the Mount Rushmore just because he's the all-time leading rusher. But
the Cowboys, you get enough stuff, Cowboys fans.
Yeah,
you don't need this too.
Don't complain.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm fine with the overall ranking, the top 4, aka the Mount Rushmore. I mean, it's hard to complain. I mean, Jim, Barry, Walter, Eric. I mean, you could maybe interchange Emmett with one of them, but at that point, you're just,
splitting hairs.
Splitting hairs, yeah. So I'm fine with what we have.
Yeah, I think our top 5 of Jim, Barry, Walter, Eric, and Emmett are perfect. You might shuffle Adrian, LaDainian, and Marshall to some degree. But I certainly think the top 5 are solid. I'm good with the entire 8. But if you guys think strongly that any changes should be made, we can discuss that real quick.
No, I mean, it looks good. I think it's so interesting that the, highest yards in the history, Emmitt Smith, we have him as 5, but that shows you how good, that we think these other guys were.
Yeah.
Taking into consideration.
And again, a lot of it is your line, your longevity. This guy played 14 seasons versus this guy that played 10. There's a lot of things to consider. But I think this is a pretty darn good Elite 8. I think our reverse tournament here worked out well. I will admit going in, I really didn't think Jim Brown. I knew he was going to be on the list. I didn't think Jim Brown was going to be the GOAT. So I am kind of surprised that we decided to go ahead and rank him 1. But when you do, a little bit of a deep dive and you look at the numbers, I don't know how you can. So, to you old guys out there that always say, Jim Brown's the greatest, I guess we agree with you because his numbers are out of this world. So, well, there you go. If you've made it this far in the podcast and you're watching us on YouTube and or listening to us, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving us a comment down below. Give us a like as well if you've made it this far. We would truly appreciate that. And give us an indication that maybe you'd like a little bit more NFL content down the road. So just to reiterate here before we cut it, Jim Brown is our GOAT. Our Mount Rushmore is Jim Brown, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, and Eric Dickerson. We are rating as the 4th greatest running back of all time. And then 5 through 8 we are giving to Emmitt Smith, Adrian Peterson, LaDainian Tomlinson, and Marshall Faulk. What do you think? Leave us a comment. Are you angry with us? Who did we not even talk about that you think should have been in discussion? Let us know in the comments. Give us your Elite 8. I'd love to see lists. That'd be fun. So we did the best we could. I think this is a hell of a list. So, yeah, it was fun today. I appreciate all the input. I think we put together a very stellar Mount Rushmore and an Elite 8. So if you guys, do you have anything in closing before we call it?
The only thing I was going to throw in, feel free to leave this in or to edit this out.
Oh, boy.
I was very, very, very close to using a veto, because we do get our vetoes, and putting James Brooks in this list of Cincinnati Bengals fans.
No.
Well, thank you for mentioning James Bye-Bye Brooks. Yeah, phenomenal Cincinnati Bengals running back.
Yep.
Yeah, we haven't had too many in the illustrious career, if you will, of the Cincinnati Bengals, for lack of a better way of putting it. We've had a lot of Hall of Fame players, again, that just aren't getting, Hall of Fame consideration. And it makes you scratch your head, and all you got to do is look at numbers. You're like, well, hey, wait a minute, how are these guys in? But, so, and I know he's not a running back, but again, I implore you, if you're listening to this, look up Ken Riley. Look at this gentleman's numbers. How is he not in the NFL Football Hall of Fame? Look at Ken Anderson. Super Bowl records. I mean, just a phenomenal player. NFL MVP. Not even considered for the NFL Hall of Fame.
Conspiracy, or
it blows the mind.
Small market.
And a lot of you guys out there that are listening to this, again, that are small market teams, the Jets, Detroit, many other teams, I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, it gets old after a while. It just needs to be based on what you did on the field. And hopefully that's what we did with our list here. So we're going to go ahead and call it. Thanks again for listening to this. If you made it this far, and we really appreciate it. So we come out with a new episode every Sunday. Who knows what next Sunday will hold. But again, comment if you want to hear more NFL stuff. We will gladly bring that to you as we are about to embark on the 2021-2022 NFL season. It's right around the corner. So thanks again, everybody. We appreciate it. For Marty and Mike, this is Tom. We're out of here. See you soon. Take care, everybody.